He paraded his new fiancée in front of me, until I revealed the baby my billionaire ex-husband hid from. The color drained from Julian's face as I shifted Clara on my hip. His eyes locked on her tiny face, those unmistakable Blackwood eyes staring back at him. "Julian, I'd like you to meet Clara Elise Rivera. Your daughter." "That's not possible." His voice was barely a whisper, fingers gripping the armrest of his chair. "We were careful." "Not careful enough, apparently." I adjusted Clara as she reached for the shiny watch on his wrist. "She's yours, Julian. I can arrange a DNA test if you need proof, but I think your eyes tell you everything you need to know." "Why didn't you tell me?" 15 months, Nora. She's 15 months old, and I'm just learning she exists. I was going to tell you the night we fought about Singapore. I had planned a special dinner. But then you left, and divorce papers arrived 3 months later. By then, it felt too late. "Sorry doesn't give me back her first steps or her first word," he said, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "No." I agreed. "It doesn't. And now you parade her in front of me right before my wedding. Right when I've finally moved on. Have you ever had to reveal a life-changing secret to someone who thought they'd already closed that chapter of their life? Someone who was about to start fresh with someone new? If you've ever had to choose between keeping a painful truth hidden or exposing it at exactly the wrong moment, this story will resonate deep in your bones. My name is Nora Rivera, and this is how I finally told my billionaire ex-husband about the daughter he never knew existed. The silk scarf around my neck felt like a noose as I watched them enter the Blackwood Foundation's annual charity gala. Julian Blackwood, my ex-husband of barely 18 months, with his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. Vivian Palmer. Former supermodel turned sustainable fashion mogul. His new fiancée. I shouldn't have come. The fundraiser was the social event of the season, but I had only attended out of obligation to my research team. Our work on early detection of rare genetic disorders deserved the funding Julian's foundation provided, even if seeing him made my chest feel hollow. "Dr. Rivera, are you all right?" My research assistant, Maya, touched my elbow gently. The concern in her eyes made me realize I'd been staring too long. "Fine." I lied, taking a steadying sip of champagne. "Just calculating how long we need to stay before making a graceful exit." Julian hadn't noticed me yet, too busy introducing Vivian to New York's elite. She sparkled in an emerald gown that made her auburn hair glow like fire. I unconsciously touched my own midnight curls, pulled into a simple updo that suddenly felt inadequate. "Who's that with Mr. Blackwood?" Maya asked. "His fiancée." The word tasted bitter. "They're getting married in December. Didn't you just finalize your divorce in February?" Julian doesn't waste time. 10 years together erased in 18 months, replaced by someone new in less than 6. Someone who didn't challenge him, who smiled adoringly at his every word. I had been watching the clock, counting minutes until I could leave, when Julian's gaze finally locked with mine across the crowded ballroom. Recognition, surprise, and something unreadable flashed across his face. He whispered something to Vivian, then began navigating toward me with determined strides. "Nora." His voice still had the power to make my spine straighten. "I didn't expect you here." Clearly. I met his eyes directly, refusing to look away. "Our team was invited. The foundation funds our research, remember?" "Of course." He glanced at Maya, who tactfully excused herself. "How are you?" "Thriving." Another lie. "Your fiancée is lovely." "Yes." Julian's eyes softened. "Vivian is uncomplicated." The implication hung between us. Unlike me. Unlike our marriage. Unlike the fights we'd had about his family's expectations and my refusal to abandon my career. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "I hope you'll both be very happy." Before he could respond, Vivian appeared at his side, sliding her arm through his. "Close up," she was even more stunning, tall, willowy, with eyes the color of whiskey. "You must be Nora," she said with practiced warmth. "Julian's told me so much about you." I doubted that very much. "All good things, I hope." "Of course." She laughed, a musical sound that probably charmed everyone she met. "He speaks very highly of your research. Something about genetic markers in infants. Prenatal detection of rare genetic disorders." I corrected. "We're developing non-invasive screening techniques for conditions previously undetectable until birth." Julian shifted uncomfortably. This had always been our dynamic, me pursuing medical breakthroughs while he managed a family empire and funded charitable causes that bore the Blackwood name. "Fascinating," Vivian said, though her eyes had already drifted to another conversation happening nearby. "Julian, darling, isn't that Senator Whitman? We should say hello." I watched them walk away, Julian's hand resting on the small of her back. The same gesture he'd once used with me. The room suddenly felt airless. "I'm leaving," I told Maya when she returned. "Make my excuses to the director." Outside in the cool September air, I leaned against a stone column and closed my eyes. 8 years as Julian Blackwood's girlfriend. 2 as his wife. Less than 2 since our divorce. And tonight was the first time I'd seen him since I signed those papers in February. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Layton. "Did you tell him?" I stared at the message, my heart racing. "No. Not tonight. Not like this." The response came quickly. "You need to tell him, Nora. Soon." I slipped the phone back into my clutch, knowing Layton was right but unable to face what that conversation would mean. "How do you tell your ex-husband that the baby he never knew existed, the baby he accidentally left behind, was about to change everything? If you've ever held on to a secret that grew heavier with each passing day, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories for more tales of love, loss, and redemption that will leave you breathless." The first time I met Julian Blackwood, I was a second-year resident working a 30-hour shift in the emergency department at Manhattan General. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I struggled to keep my eyes open, surviving on vending machine coffee and sheer determination. It was just past midnight when the nurse at the desk called my name. "Dr. Rivera, cubicle 3. Laceration above the eyebrow, need stitches." I grabbed the chart and pulled back the curtain to find a man in his early 30s holding a bloody towel to his forehead. His tailored shirt was splattered with blood, the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms. Despite the late hour and his injury, he radiated impatience and authority. "About time." He lowered the towel, revealing a nasty gash above his right eyebrow. "I've been waiting for 20 minutes. I pulled on gloves, maintaining the professional smile I'd perfected during my years of dealing with difficult patients. Emergency departments prioritize based on severity, not arrival time, Mr. Blackwood. Julian Blackwood. He said it like it should mean something to me. I cleaned the wound methodically, ignoring his winces. "Well, Mr. Blackwood, you need approximately 7 stitches. This will take about 15 minutes. It's just a cut," he insisted, fidgeting as I prepared the anesthetic. "Can't you just put a bandage on it and let me go? I have a meeting at 9 tomorrow. Unless you want a scar that ruins your perfect profile, no." I countered, threading the needle. "Hold still." His surprised laughter changed something in the air between us. "You don't know who I am, do you? A patient with a laceration requiring approximately 7 stitches. I replied, beginning the first stitch. As I said, hold still. Later, after I'd finished the stitches and was giving him care instructions, Julian studied me with newfound interest. His initial arrogance had softened into curiosity. "Dr. Rivera." He read my name tag. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night?" I looked up from the discharge paperwork, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me? Dinner. A meal people typically enjoy in the evening. Usually involves sitting, eating, perhaps some conversation. I'm familiar with the concept, I replied dryly. I'm also familiar with hospital policy about dating patients. Technically, once I walk out that door, I'm no longer your patient. Technically, I'm at the end of a 30-hour shift and the last thing I need is dinner with someone who thinks his name should get him special treatment. Instead of being offended, Julian smiled a genuine smile that transformed his face and made me notice, for the first time, how striking his eyes were. A deep blue that looked almost violet under the hospital lights. Fair enough. He handed back the paperwork. But I should warn you, Dr. Rivera, I'm persistent when I find something interesting. I'm not a thing, Mr. Blackwood. I replied, fighting an unexpected smile of my own. And persistence can look a lot like harassment if you're not careful. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Duly noted. Thank you for the stitches. They're very neat. After he left, the nurse at the station leaned over. Do you have any idea who that was? I shrugged. Someone with more money than patience. That was Julian Blackwood. As in Blackwood Industries. As in the family that donated the entire north wing of this hospital. I feigned indifference, but that night, as I finally crawled into my tiny apartment bed, I found myself Googling his name. The results were overwhelming business journals highlighting his innovative leadership, society pages documenting his appearances at charity events, financial reports on his family's vast holdings in technology and real estate. Julian Blackwood was not just wealthy, he belonged to a different world entirely. One where people like me chronically sleep-deprived medical residents with student loan debt and a barely furnished apartment simply didn't exist. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The following day, an enormous arrangement of white orchids arrived at the hospital with a simple note, "Thank you for your excellent care. Dinner offer still stands. Julian Blackwood." I gave the flowers to Mrs. Peterson in room 412, who was recovering from heart surgery. The note I crumpled and tossed in the trash. 2 days later, another delivery arrived, a basket of gourmet coffee beans with a note about fueling those 30-hour shifts. I shared it with the nursing staff. After a week of daily gifts, each one more thoughtful than the last, Julian appeared at the end of my shift. He was leaning against a sleek black car, 2 coffee cups in hand, the stitches in his forehead healing nicely. "One breakfast," he said, offering me a cup. "That's all I'm asking for." I should have said no. I had every intention of saying no. But I'd been on my feet for 16 hours, the coffee smelled heavenly, and there was something disarming about the way he stood there, a man clearly accustomed to getting his way, yet somehow humble in that moment. "Just breakfast," I said, accepting the cup. "And then you stop sending things to the hospital. That's the deal." He smiled, opening the car door. Breakfast became lunch the following week. Lunch became dinner a few days later. Dinner became weekends at his Hamptons estate and holidays in places I'd only seen in magazines. Julian swept into my life like a hurricane, rearranging everything in his path. And I, perpetually sleep-deprived and subsisting on hospital cafeteria food, was unprepared for the force of his attention. But beneath the whirlwind romance, we were never a perfect match. Julian lived in a world where problems could be solved with money or connections. I lived in one where some battles couldn't be won no matter how hard you fought. He thrived on social gatherings and business meetings, I preferred quiet nights and medical journals. Still, something between us worked. For a while. Julian's intensity matched my own, though directed at different pursuits. He approached business with the same passion I brought to medicine. We both worked long hours, driven by ambition and the desire to make our mark. When we were together, the contrast in our lives created a balance, his wealth and connections opening doors I'd never known existed, my practical nature and dedication to service grounding him in realities his privilege had sheltered him from. For the first time in his life, Julian had someone who wasn't impressed by his family name or fortune. For the first time in mine, I had someone who truly believed in my potential without limits. The night he proposed, nearly 2 years after those 7 stitches, we were in his penthouse overlooking Central Park. I had just completed my residency and was considering several research fellowships. Julian had champagne waiting when I arrived, the city lights twinkling below us like earthbound stars. "I heard back from Mass General today," I said, kicking off my shoes and collapsing onto his absurdly comfortable couch. "They want me for the genetic research program." "It's exactly what I've been working toward." Julian was uncharacteristically quiet as he handed me a glass of champagne. "That's in Boston." "Yes." I took a sip, watching him over the rim of my glass. "It's one of the top programs in the country." He sat beside me, taking my free hand in his. "What about Columbia? Or Mount Sinai? You had offers here in New York." "They're excellent programs." I agreed. "But Mass General is pioneering the exact research I want to pursue." Julian set down his glass, reaching into his pocket. "This isn't how I planned to do this." He pulled out a small velvet box. "I had a whole speech prepared, something about how you've changed my life, how I can't imagine a future without you in it. But now I'm thinking I should be asking if I'm in your future at all." He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, larger than anything I'd ever imagined wearing. The sight of it made my breath catch. "Nora Rivera," he said softly. "I love you, your brilliance, your compassion, your complete disregard for my family name. Will you marry me?" My heart raced as conflicting emotions collided: love for this man who'd upended my carefully planned life, excitement about the fellowship that represented everything I'd worked toward, fear of having to choose between the two. "What about Boston?" I whispered. "We'll figure it out." Julian's confidence never wavered. "I can expand Blackwood Industries' presence there. Open a new office. Split my time between cities. You do that? I'd do anything for you." He took the ring from its box. "I just want you in my life, Nora. The rest is details." Looking back now, I wonder if we both believed it would be that simple, that love would be enough to bridge our different worlds, different priorities, different visions of what our life together would look like. I said yes that night. The ring felt foreign on my finger, its weight unfamiliar. But Julian's arms around me felt like home, and in that moment, I believed we could make it work. We married 6 months later in a ceremony that was a compromise between Julian's family's expectations and my desire for simplicity. 300 guests instead of the 1,000 his mother had initially proposed. A historic Manhattan church instead of the Blackwood estate. My father, a high school physics teacher, walking me down the aisle toward Julian, who waited beneath an archway of white roses with tears in his eyes. For our honeymoon, Julian surprised me with a month in the Greek islands, a luxury I would never have allowed myself, but one he insisted I deserved. We swam in crystal waters, explored ancient ruins, and made love on private beaches beneath star-filled skies. Away from the pressures of his family and my career, we existed in a perfect bubble of happiness. Reality intruded soon enough. I deferred the fellowship at Mass General to accept a research position at Columbia, a compromise that Julian celebrated as a win for both of us. Meanwhile, he took on more responsibility at Blackwood Industries, preparing to eventually succeed his father as CEO. The problem started subtly at first: a missed dinner here, a rescheduled weekend there. Julian's family expected me to step into a role I never wanted, the Blackwood wife who organized charity luncheons and sat on foundation boards. Meanwhile, I had finally begun critical research on genetic disorders, work that consumed my days and many nights. 6 months into our marriage, the arguments began in earnest. "You're never home," Julian would complain, loosening his tie after another event I'd missed. My mother had to explain again why my wife couldn't attend the foundation dinner. "I told you I couldn't make it," I said, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing research data. "We had a breakthrough with the amniotic markers." "Nora," he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "There are certain expectations that come with being a Blackwood. I didn't marry your name. I finally looked at him, frustration evident in my voice. I married you. These arguments played on repeat, growing more bitter each time. Julian couldn't understand why I wouldn't embrace the opportunities his world offered, the connections, the influence, the ability to affect change on a large scale through the Blackwood Foundation. I couldn't understand why my work, saving lives through medical research, wasn't as important as attending galas and sitting on boards. 1 year and 8 months into our marriage, the breaking point came. I arrived home late from the lab to find Julian waiting in our darkened living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. The board is expanding the foundation's work in Singapore, he said without preamble. They want me to oversee the new headquarters there. I set down my bag, switching on a lamp to better see his expression. For how long? 2 years, minimum. He set his glass on the coffee table and came to sit beside me on our plush sofa. It's time, Nora. You can take a break from the research, join me in Singapore. We'll finally have time together. A break? I stared at him, unable to process what he was suggesting. Julian, we're on the verge of a major breakthrough. I can't abandon my team now. Can't. Or won't. His voice hardened, a flush rising on his cheeks. 10 years, Nora. 10 years of watching you choose your work over everything else. Over me. That's not fair. I stood up, anger rising to match his. I've supported every one of your ventures, from afar. Always from your lab or the hospital. Always with one foot out the door. He stood too, towering over me. You won't even give the foundation the courtesy of attending events, yet you expect me to rearrange my entire career around yours. That's not what I'm asking for. Then what are you asking for? Because from where I stand, this marriage has always been about what works for you. Your career. Your schedule. Your priorities. My priorities save lives, Julian. What do yours do? The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd crossed a line. Julian's face went blank, that carefully controlled mask he wore in business negotiations sliding into place. The Blackwood Foundation has funded medical research that saved thousands of lives, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Built hospitals in underserved communities. Provided education for children who would otherwise have none. But I suppose that's all meaningless since I'm not the one wearing the lab coat. Julian, I didn't mean I think you did. He picked up his glass, draining the remaining whiskey. I'm leaving for Singapore next week. You have until then to decide if you're coming with me. If not. The threat hung in air between us, unspoken but clear. If not, what? I challenged, tears burning behind my eyes. You'll divorce me? His silence was answer enough. The fight escalated until words were said that couldn't be unsaid. Accusations about priorities, about commitment, about what it meant to be a partnership. By the time Julian stormed out of our penthouse at 2 a.m, we were both wounded beyond what felt reparable. He left for Singapore alone the following week. Divorce papers arrived 3 months later, with a generous settlement that felt more like a payoff than an ending. I signed them without contest, too proud to fight for a marriage that had clearly meant less to him than his family legacy. What Julian didn't know, what I hadn't had the chance to tell him before our final fight, was that I was 6 weeks pregnant when he left. I had taken the test that morning, planned a special dinner to tell him that night. Instead, I ended up alone, watching him walk out the door. I never told him. Pride, anger, hurt, they all played their part in my silence. By the time the divorce was finalized, our daughter was 4 months old, and Julian was rumored to be dating a famous model who accompanied him to business events and foundation galas. Clara Elise Rivera. My daughter. My miracle. My secret. Have you ever kept a secret that ate away at you, even when you told yourself it was the right thing to do? Comment below with secret keeper if you understand the weight of words unspoken and decisions that can't be undone. The first time I held Clara in my arms, I searched her tiny face for signs of Julian. She had my olive complexion and dark hair, but those eyes, even clouded with newborn uncertainty, were unmistakably Blackwood. That distinctive blue that looked almost violet in certain lights. Dr. Layton, who had delivered her and was one of the few people who knew the truth about her parentage, stood by my hospital bed with an expression of concern. "You need to tell him, Nora." His voice was gentle but firm. "He has a right to know. He made his choice." I cradled Clara closer, inhaling her newborn scent. "He left, Peter. He sent divorce papers without even a conversation. He's clearly moved on." Layton sighed, adjusting his glasses. "People make mistakes, especially when they're hurt. That doesn't erase his right to know his child. I'll think about it." I promised, though we both knew I had no intention of reaching out to Julian. In those early months, I told myself I was protecting Clara from rejection. What if Julian didn't want her? What if he tried to take her from me using his family's considerable influence and resources? What if he insisted on being involved but only superficially, dropping in and out of her life when it suited his schedule? Each rationalization made it easier to maintain my silence. As Clara grew, babbling her first words and taking her first tentative steps, I convinced myself that we were complete without Julian. I had built a life for us, a comfortable apartment near the research center, a reliable nanny for the days I couldn't bring Clara to my office, a small but supportive circle of friends who helped when they could. If I occasionally caught myself searching for Julian in news articles or social media, noting how his ventures in Singapore had flourished, how he appeared at events with increasingly glamorous women on his arm, I told myself it was mere curiosity. Not longing. Not regret. By the time Clara was 15 months old, Julian Blackwood existed only in the deepest corners of my heart and in the eyes of my daughter, who watched the world with his intensity, his curiosity, his quiet determination. Then came the Blackwood Foundation's annual charity gala, and the carefully constructed walls I'd built between past and present began to crumble. "Dr. Rivera, Dr. Layton is looking for you. He says it's urgent." I jerked my head up from the microscope, blinking at my assistant. 3 days had passed since the foundation gala, and I'd thrown myself into work to avoid thinking about Julian or Vivian or the conversation I knew I couldn't postpone much longer. "Did he say what it's about?" "Something about the Blackwood Foundation requesting a meeting with your research team." He seemed concerned. My stomach dropped. Julian never took an interest in the specific research projects his foundation funded. That was left to the board and the scientific advisory committee. If he was requesting a meeting, I found Layton in his office, pacing the small space between his desk and the wall of medical textbooks that had been his companions through decades of research. "What's going on, Peter?" He turned, his expression grave. "The foundation wants a full presentation on our prenatal screening program. Next week." "That's not unusual," I said carefully, trying to calm the sudden racing of my heart. "We're up for renewal in January. Julian Blackwood will be attending personally, along with his fiancée, who apparently has a special interest in maternal health initiatives." I sank into the chair opposite his desk. "Did he say why?" "Only that the foundation is re-evaluating its funding priorities." Layton removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Nora, if they pull our funding they won't." I stood, decision made. "I'll handle this." "How?" "By telling the truth." Finally. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, watching my daughter sleep in her crib. Clara had Julian's eyes, that distinctive Blackwood blue that looked almost violet in certain lights. His determined chin, too. But she had my curls and olive complexion, my tendency to furrow her brow when concentrating. She was the perfect blend of us, the living evidence of what we'd once been to each other. And I had kept her from him for 15 months. My reasons had seemed valid at the time. Julian had already filed for divorce when I discovered I was pregnant. He was building a new life in Singapore, clearly moving on. Telling him would have felt like manipulating him into staying, using our child as leverage in a marriage that was already broken. But watching Vivian on his arm at the gala, hearing them discuss their December wedding, suddenly my reasons felt hollow, selfish. Whatever Julian's faults, he had a right to know his daughter. And Clara had a right to know her father. Tomorrow, I would call him. Not his office, not his assistant. Him directly. Before any foundation meeting where personal revelations might become public spectacle. I owed us both that much. But Julian called me first that we need to talk. His voice through the phone was clipped, professional. About the research program. Yes, I heard there's a review meeting scheduled. Julian, before that happens, there's something. Vivian is very interested in your work. He continued as if I hadn't spoken. She lost a cousin to a genetic disorder that wasn't detected until birth. She thinks the foundation should be investing more in preventative screening. That's actually what we're doing. I switched the phone to my other ear, watching Clara play with blocks on my office floor. I'd brought her to the lab today, unable to bear leaving her at daycare, knowing what conversation lay ahead. The presentation is scheduled for Thursday at 10. The board will expect detailed protocols, success metrics, and projections for the next phase of research. Julian. I cut him off. We need to talk before Thursday. Privately. A pause. Is there a problem with the research? No. It's personal. I took a deep breath. Please. It's important. Another pause, longer this time. Fine. I can spare 30 minutes tomorrow afternoon. My office, 4 o'clock. Not your office. I said quickly. Somewhere private. Nora, I have back-to-back meetings all day. I'm fitting you in between calls with Singapore and London. Trust me. You'll want privacy for this conversation. Something in my voice must have finally registered, because his tone changed. What's going on? Tomorrow. 4 o'clock. I'll come to the Blackwood building, but we'll talk in private. He agreed, reluctantly, and we settled on the private terrace outside his executive suite. As I hung up, Clara toppled her block tower and looked up at me with Julian's eyes, wide with surprise at her own destruction. Tomorrow. I told her, kneeling to help rebuild. Tomorrow you meet your father. Would you tell someone life-changing news if it meant disrupting their perfect new life? Hit that subscribe button now and join Mr. Arden's Heart Stories community, where we explore these impossible choices every week. The Blackwood building dominated the Manhattan skyline, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that reflected Julian's aesthetic, modern, imposing, designed to impress. I'd avoided it since our separation, sending colleagues to any meetings held there. Now, standing in the private elevator that required a special key card, I felt like an intruder. Clara squirmed in my arms, fascinated by her reflection in the mirrored walls. I had dressed her in a navy blue dress that brought out her eyes, combed her wild curls into some semblance of order. Almost there, sweetheart. I whispered, as much to myself as to her. When the elevator doors opened, Julian's assistant, a new one I didn't recognize, looked up with a professionally bland smile that faltered when she saw Clara. Dr. Rivera. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you, but... This is my daughter. I said calmly. He's expecting both of us. She hesitated, then nodded. The terrace is through those doors. He should be there shortly. I carried Clara outside, where the afternoon sun warmed the private garden Julian had insisted on when redesigning the executive floor. He'd always needed green spaces, even in the middle of the concrete jungle. Look, Clara. I pointed to a butterfly landing on a nearby flower. Isn't it pretty? She babbled in response, reaching toward it with chubby fingers. At 15 months, she was just beginning to form words, her vocabulary limited to mama, no, and more. Nora. I turned to find Julian standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, his dark hair shorter than when I'd last seen him. Thank you for meeting me, I said, shifting Clara to my hip. His eyes moved to her, narrowing slightly. You brought your child to a business meeting? She's why I'm here. I took a step closer. Julian, I'd like you to meet Clara Elise Rivera. Your daughter. The color drained from his face. What? She was born on June 12 last year. I was 6 weeks pregnant when you left for Singapore. Julian stared at Clara, who stared back with equal intensity, her little brow furrowed in that way that mirrored my own concentration. No one looking at them together could deny the resemblance, those blackwood eyes, that determined jaw. That's not possible. His voice was barely audible. We were careful. Not careful enough, apparently. I adjusted Clara on my hip. She's yours, Julian. I can arrange a DNA test if you need proof, but I think your eyes can tell you what you need to know. He took a step forward, then stopped. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. The night we fought about Singapore I had planned to tell you over dinner. Then everything exploded, and you left, and by the time I processed what had happened, divorce papers had arrived. You could have called. Emailed. Something. His voice rose, then he visibly restrained himself, glancing at Clara. 15 months, Nora. She's 15 months old, and I'm just learning she exists. I made a mistake. I met his gaze directly. I was hurt and angry and proud. And then time passed, and it became harder to pick up the phone. But seeing you at the gala with Vivian, hearing about your December wedding. Clara deserves to know her father. And you deserve to know your daughter. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. He moved to one of the terrace chairs and sank into it, eyes never leaving Clara. Does anyone else know? Just Dr. Layton. He's the one who delivered her. Not my family. Not my mother. I shook my head. No one in the Blackwood orbit knows she exists. Clara chose that moment to wriggle free from my grasp. I set her down, watching as she took tentative steps toward Julian, drawn by the shiny watch on his wrist. He remained perfectly still as she approached, her tiny hand reaching out to touch the gleaming metal. Hi. He said softly, his voice gentler than I'd heard it in years. Hi. Clara echoed, her face breaking into a delighted smile at her own accomplishment. Something shifted in Julian's expression, surprise, wonder, a flash of joy quickly tempered by the reality of our situation. He looked up at me. I've missed 15 months of her life. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back her first steps. Her first word. No. I agreed. It doesn't. Clara, bored with Julian's watch, toddled back toward me, stumbling slightly. Julian half rose from his chair instinctively, ready to catch her, then sank back as I steadied her. What happens now? He asked. That depends on what you want. She's your daughter, Julian. You have rights. But you also have a fiancé and a life that doesn't include us. He flinched. Vivian doesn't know. I assumed as much. We sat in silence for a moment, the Manhattan traffic a distant hum below us. Clara began examining a potted plant with serious concentration, unaware that her entire future hung in the balance of this conversation. I need time. Julian finally said. To process this. To figure out what it means. Of course. I gathered Clara into my arms. But Julian, the foundation meeting on Thursday. We'll proceed as scheduled. His expression hardened. This is personal. It has nothing to do with your research funding. I nodded, relieved at least that my team wouldn't suffer for my decisions. I'll bring all the documentation you need for Clara. Birth certificate, medical records, everything. He stood as I prepared to leave. Nora. I turned back. She has my eyes. Yes. I said softly. She does. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the foundation meeting while trying to prepare both my research presentation and myself emotionally. Clara sensed my anxiety, becoming clingier than usual, her little hands holding onto my clothes as if afraid I might disappear. The night before the meeting, as I rehearsed my presentation one final time, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Is she allergic to anything? Medical conditions I should be aware of? It took me a moment to realize it was Julian. No allergies. Perfect health. Regular checkups with pediatrician. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, thank you. That simple exchange, mundane as it was, caused an unexpected tightening in my chest. This was Julian, trying to be a father with the only information he had. Julian, who had missed 15 months but was already thinking about allergies and medical conditions. I almost texted back something more personal about how Clara loves music, how she laughs when I pretend to sneeze, how she already turns pages in books with careful determination. But I stopped myself. There would be time for those details later, if Julian wanted them. If Julian wanted to be part of her life at all. The foundation meeting was as uncomfortable as I had anticipated. Julian sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by board members and scientific advisors. Vivian sat beside him, elegant in a cream suit, her engagement ring catching the light each time she moved her hand. I delivered our presentation methodically, explaining our research progress, the successful trials, the lives our screening techniques could save. Throughout, Julian's expression remained impassive, professional. If anyone noticed the tension between us, they didn't comment. Dr. Rivera. Vivian said when I concluded. Your work is remarkable. How soon until these screenings could be widely available? With proper funding, we could begin implementation at select hospitals within 6 months. Full availability would take approximately 18 months. She turned to Julian. Darling, this is exactly the kind of initiative we discussed for the Singapore expansion. Preventative care that could save families from what my cousin's family endured. Julian nodded, his eyes meeting mine briefly. The board will need to review the complete data, but I'm inclined to agree this deserves continued support. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up communications. As everyone filed out, Julian touched my elbow. A moment, Dr. Rivera. We waited until the room emptied, standing in awkward silence until the door closed behind the last board member. I told Vivian. He said without preamble. I hadn't expected that. How did she take it? About as well as can be expected when your fiancé reveals he has a child with his ex-wife. His mouth twisted. She's processing. And you? Have you processed it yet? I spent last night looking at baby pictures of myself. The resemblance is undeniable. He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of himself as a toddler. The same eyes, the same determined expression Clara often wore. I've scheduled a DNA test for Monday. He continued. Not because I doubt you, but because it will be required legally. Legally. I want to establish paternity officially. I want my name on her birth certificate. I want her to have my name. I blinked, surprised by his decisiveness. Julian, we should discuss this. Clara has only known me her whole life. Suddenly introducing you, changing her name I've missed 15 months, Nora. I won't miss any more. His expression softened. I'm not trying to take her from you. I just want to be her father. In every way that matters. And Vivian? Your wedding. Singapore. He looked away. Complications to be sorted out. She's not a complication, Julian. I said firmly. She's a child. Our child. I know that. He met my gaze again. Which is why I've asked the board to transfer me back to New York permanently. The Singapore expansion can be managed remotely. My breath caught. And Vivian understands that my daughter comes first. His voice held a finality I remembered from our marriage. Julian Blackwood had made a decision, and the world would rearrange itself accordingly. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be part of Clara's life. Completely. I want joint custody. I want to be there for every milestone I've already missed. I want her to know she has a father who loves her, even if he didn't know she existed until yesterday. The intensity in his eyes was both familiar and new, the determination I'd always known in him, now focused entirely on our daughter. We'll need to create a transition plan, I said, practical concerns surfacing. She doesn't know you yet. We can start with short visits, build up gradually, whatever it takes. He agreed. I'll follow your lead on this, Nora. You know her best. The simple acknowledgement that I had been a good mother, that I knew what Clara needed, loosened something tight in my chest. What about us? I asked quietly. How do we do this? Co-parent while you're engaged to someone else? Julian ran a hand through his hair. Honestly, I don't know yet. Everything's changed in the last 24 hours. He hesitated. But Vivian and we've agreed to postpone the wedding. Indefinitely. Julian, not because of you. He clarified. Because of Clara. Because I need to be a father before I can be someone's husband again. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Even if that means my mother will be devastated about canceling the society wedding of the year. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. She'll survive. She always does. For a moment, we were again the couple who had navigated his family's expectations together, who had found humor in the absurdities of the Blackwood dynasty. Can I see her again? He asked. This weekend, maybe. Saturday. I offered. She's most cheerful in the mornings. Come to my apartment around 9. We can have breakfast. I'll be there. As we walked toward the elevator together, Julian paused. You know, you never asked for child support. All this time, you've been doing everything alone. We manage. I said simply. My research pays well enough. That ends now. He said firmly. She's a Blackwood, Nora. She deserves everything that comes with that name. She's a Rivera, too. I reminded him. Don't forget that part. He studied my face for a long moment. I never could forget anything about you, Nora. That was part of our problem. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, breaking the moment. As I stepped inside, Julian held the door. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry for how things ended between us. Not just because of Clara, but because we deserved better. The doors closed before I could respond, leaving me with the echo of words I never thought I'd hear from Julian Blackwood, an apology, freely given, with no expectation of anything in return. As the elevator descended, I thought about the complex path ahead, building a co-parenting relationship with my ex-husband, introducing Clara to the father she never knew existed, navigating the inevitable complications of the Blackwood family dynamics. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But watching the floors tick down, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 18 months, hope. Not for a reconciliation or a fairy tale ending, but for something real and important, a family, redefined on our own terms. For Clara, that would be enough. For now, it would be enough for me too. If you believe everyone deserves a second chance at family, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories. Your support helps us share more stories of forgiveness, redemption, and the complicated beauty of love in all its forms. Saturday morning arrived with a crisp autumn chill and my stomach in knots. I'd spent the night before cleaning our already tidy apartment, as if Julian might judge my parenting abilities by the state of our living room. Clara sensed my anxiety, watching me with those perceptive Blackwood eyes as I changed her outfit 3 times, settling on a simple blue dress with tiny white flowers. It's just breakfast, I told myself, arranging fresh fruit on a platter. Just breakfast with the billionaire father of your child, who until 3 days ago didn't know she existed. When the doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock, Clara looked up from her blocks with curious interest. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. Julian stood in the hallway looking decidedly unbillionaire-like in jeans and a simple gray sweater. He held a stuffed elephant in one hand and a bakery box in the other. "I brought croissants," he said, his usual confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic nervousness. "And this." He held up the elephant. I wasn't sure, do 15-month-olds like stuffed animals? The uncertainty in his voice made something soften inside me. This was Julian Blackwood, who negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, anxious about whether a toddler would like a stuffed elephant. "They do." I stepped aside to let him in. "Come in. Clara's in the living room." Julian hesitated in the doorway of my modest apartment, taking in the colorful toys scattered across the floor, the bookshelves filled with medical texts and children's books, the framed photos of Clara that documented her short life. "You've made a beautiful home for her," he said quietly, setting the bakery box on the counter. "Thank you." It was unexpectedly important to hear him acknowledge that. "We've been happy here." He nodded, then took a deep breath and moved toward the living room where Clara sat surrounded by blocks. She looked up as he approached, her expression curious but not fearful. Julian crouched down to her level, careful to maintain some distance. "Hi, Clara. Do you remember me? We met the other day." Clara studied him with that intense focus that was so like his own. To my surprise, she held out a block to him, her standard offering to people she decided might be worth knowing. "For me?" Julian asked, accepting the block with appropriate solemnity. "Thank you. That's very generous." He sat cross-legged on the floor, placing the block carefully in the tower Clara was building. When it didn't immediately topple, she gave him an approving nod and handed him another. I watched from the doorway as Julian Blackwood, who commanded boardrooms and moved markets, patiently built block towers with the daughter he'd only just met. He followed her lead, responded to her nonsensical babbling as if it were fascinating conversation, and when she eventually allowed him to introduce the stuffed elephant, his smile was so genuine it made my chest ache. "Is this okay?" he asked me softly when Clara wandered to her bookshelf in search of a new activity. "Am I doing this right?" "There's no right way." I sat on the couch, watching as Clara returned with a book, climbing onto Julian's lap without hesitation as if she'd done it 100 times before. "She just knows what she wants. She's very decisive," Julian observed as Clara opened the book and pointed imperiously at a picture. "Just like her mother. And determined. Like her father." Our eyes met over Clara's dark curls, a moment of recognition passing between us. No matter what had happened between us, this child was the best of both of us, my compassion and his drive, my curiosity and his confidence. Julian read 3 books, built 2 more towers, and fed Clara pieces of croissant before she began rubbing her eyes, the universal signal for an impending nap. When I moved to take her, Julian's arms tightened slightly before relaxing. "Sorry." He handed her over. I know." I adjusted Clara against my shoulder, her head already heavy with approaching sleep. "You can put her down for a nap next time." "Next time," he repeated, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for that." While I settled Clara in her crib, Julian explored the apartment, examining photos and bookshelves with careful attention. When I returned to the kitchen, he was holding a framed ultrasound picture I kept on the refrigerator. "Was this her?" he asked, voice thick with emotion. 20 weeks. I nodded. "The day I found out she was a girl." He set the photo down carefully. "I should have been there." "Yes." I agreed, seeing no point in denying it. "You should have. My father thinks I should sue for full custody." His voice was conversational, as if discussing the weather, but the word sent ice through my veins. He says with our resources, we could build a case based on your deception. I stiffened, hands gripping the counter. Is that what you want? No. Julian turned to face me, his expression serious. Absolutely not. I told him to stay out of it. That this is between us, and we'll figure it out our way. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by anger. Your father has no right, I know. Julian moved closer, not touching me but close enough that I could smell his familiar cologne. I'm not telling you this to threaten you, Nora. I'm telling you because I want you to know where I stand. Clara needs both of us. I won't let anyone, not even my father, suggest otherwise. The intensity in his eyes reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. That unwavering certainty, that ability to draw boundaries even against the most powerful forces in his life. What about Vivian? I asked, needing to understand all the complications we faced. Julian sighed, running a hand through his hair. She's hurt. Confused. Angry, mostly at being blindsided. He moved to the living room window, staring out at the city. We were supposed to be starting fresh in Singapore after the wedding. A new chapter. Instead, you're staying in New York to co-parent with your ex-wife. I finished for him. Not exactly the fairy tale she signed up for. No. He turned back to me. But she's trying to understand. She asked for some space to process everything before making any decisions. And if she can't accept it, if she gives you an ultimatum, then the decision is already made. Julian's voice was firm. Clara comes first. Always. The simplicity of his answer surprised me. In our marriage, Julian had always tried to balance competing priorities, his family's expectations, his business responsibilities, our relationship. He'd rarely placed anything above all else so definitively. What happens next? I asked. Practically speaking. Julian seemed relieved to focus on logistics. I'd like to see Clara regularly. Build a relationship gradually, as you suggested. He hesitated. And I'd like to tell my mother. She deserves to know she has a granddaughter. I nodded, having expected this. Your mother was always kind to me. Even when I failed to be the daughter-in-law she wanted. She'll be thrilled. Julian smiled slightly. And immediately start planning Clara's debut into society, her education through graduate school, and probably her wedding. Despite everything, I laughed. That sounds like Eleanor. As for legal arrangements, Julian continued. I've asked my attorneys to draft something fair. Joint custody, gradually implemented. Child support, of course. And I'd like to establish a trust for her future. I started to protest, but Julian held up a hand. It's not about buying my way into her life, Nora. It's about ensuring she has every advantage I can provide. Education, opportunities, security. Wouldn't you want that for her even if I wasn't her father? He had a point. My pride wanted to refuse, to prove I could provide everything Clara needed without Blackwood money. But that would be putting my ego above my daughter's interests. We can discuss the details. I conceded. But Julian, money isn't everything. Time, attention, consistency, those matter more. I know. His eyes held mine. I intend to provide all of that too. As Julian prepared to leave after promising to return the following day, he paused at the door. Thank you, he said softly. For raising her so well. For letting me into her life despite everything. Not everyone would be so generous. It's not generosity. I replied honestly. It's what's right for Clara. Still. He hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, seeing you with her the mother you've become, it's remarkable. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me with the echo of a compliment that felt more genuine than any he'd given me during our marriage. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who hurt you deeply? Someone you needed to forgive, not for their sake, but for your child's. Share your story in the comments below and let's support each other through these complex family journeys. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm in our lives. Julian visited every other day, gradually extending the time he spent with Clara. He was methodical in his approach to fatherhood, researching child development with the same intensity he brought to business acquisitions, asking thoughtful questions about Clara's routines and preferences. I watched him learning to change diapers with determined concentration, figuring out which foods Clara would eat and which would end up on the floor, discovering the exact bounce and sway combination that would soothe her when she was cranky. He never complained, never suggested these tasks were beneath him, never tried to outsource the hard parts of parenting. Julian Blackwood, who had teams of people handling every aspect of his life, insisted on doing the mundane work of fatherhood himself. One evening, after Clara had fallen asleep during his visit, Julian lingered at my apartment, helping me clean up the disaster zone of toys and books that seemed to multiply whenever my back was turned. "You're good at this," I observed, watching him organize blocks by color and size, something I'd never bothered to do. "I like systems." He shrugged. "Order from chaos." "I meant parenting." "You're good at being her father." Julian looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. Thank you." "I'm trying." He shelved the last book, then sat on the couch, looking suddenly hesitant. "Nora, there's something I need to discuss with you." The formal tone set off warning bells. "Is everything okay?" "My mother wants to meet Clara," he said carefully. "She's been patient, but—" "I understand." "When?" "Sunday." He continued quickly, as if expecting resistance. "At my apartment, not the family estate. Just her, no one else. I've told her it needs to be casual, low-key. No grand Blackwood production." I considered this. "Your mother has never done anything low-key in her life." Julian laughed, tension easing from his shoulders. "True. But she's trying. For Clara's sake. For mine." "Sunday, then." I agreed. "But Julian, if she starts talking about boarding schools or debutante balls for a 15-month-old, I reserve the right to shut it down." "Deal." His smile faded into something more serious. "There's one more thing. My father." My stomach tightened. "What about him?" "He wants a DNA test." Julian held up his hands at my expression. I know. I told him it's unnecessary. That I have no doubts. But he's insisting, threatening to contest any inheritance or trust one set up for Clara without proof of paternity. I wanted to refuse on principle. Robert Blackwood had never approved of me, had made it clear he considered me an unsuitable match for his son and heir. Now he wanted to question Clara's paternity, as if I were trying to con the Blackwood fortune. But fighting Robert Blackwood would only prolong the inevitable and delay Clara's legal recognition as Julian's daughter. "Fine," I said tightly. "But I want it done privately. No Blackwood medical facilities. Independent lab, confidential results. Already arranged." Julian's relief was palpable. "Next Tuesday, if that works for you." I nodded, still bothered by the necessity but pragmatic enough to recognize when a battle wasn't worth fighting. "You know, we need to figure out how to tell Clara about all this when she's older," I said, changing the subject. "How we explain why her father wasn't around for the first part of her life." Julian's expression grew thoughtful. "We tell her the truth. That her parents loved each other but couldn't make their marriage work. That her father didn't know about her because of mistakes and misunderstandings. That once he knew, he did everything possible to be part of her life." It sounded simple when he put it that way. A clean narrative without the messy reality of hurt feelings, pride, and deliberate silence. "And what about now?" I asked. "What do we tell her about us? About you and Vivian?" Julian was quiet for a long moment. Vivian and I have ended our engagement. He finally said. It was the right decision for everyone. I'm sorry. I said, though I wasn't entirely sure if I meant it. Don't be. He met my eyes. It wouldn't have worked, even without Clara. We wanted different things. I think I was trying to find something uncomplicated. After you. After us. Because I was too complicated. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Because what we had was complicated. Intense. Real. He sighed. After you, anything else feels like settling. The words hung between us, honest in a way we rarely had been during our marriage. I didn't know how to respond, what to do with this admission that seemed to crack open a door I'd firmly closed. Julian saved me from having to answer by standing abruptly. I should go. It's late. Yes. I walked him to the door, maintaining a careful distance. Sunday, then. For your mother. Sunday. He paused, hand on the doorknob. Nora, I'm not expecting anything. Between us, I mean. I just wanted you to know where things stand with Vivian. Thank you for telling me. I said, neutrally. Good night, Julian. After he left, I stood in my quiet apartment, surrounded by evidence of the life I'd built without him and the changes his presence was already bringing. Clara's toys now included expensive puzzles and developmental games Julian had researched. Her bookshelf held new volumes he brought each visit, determined to foster a love of reading. Her routine now accounted for daddy time, a phrase that still felt foreign on my tongue. I wasn't sure what I felt about Julian's revelation regarding Vivian. Relief that we wouldn't have to navigate co-parenting with a stepmother in the picture. Concern that he might expect our relationship to change. Or something more complicated that I wasn't ready to examine. Whatever the future held, one thing was becoming clear: Julian Blackwood was proving to be a better father than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. And that changed everything. Have you ever had someone surprise you by rising to an occasion you never expected them to face? Comment below with unexpected hero if you've witnessed someone transform when given a second chance. Eleanor Blackwood arrived at Julian's apartment precisely at noon on Sunday, dressed in what constituted casual attire in her world: a perfectly tailored pantsuit in soft gray, accessorized with pearls that probably cost more than my annual salary. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, not a strand out of place. Nora. She embraced me with genuine warmth when Julian ushered us in. It's been too long. I returned the hug, surprised by how good it felt. Despite our differences, I had always respected Eleanor. Unlike her husband, she had never treated me as unworthy of the Blackwood name, only unsuitable for the role she believed a Blackwood wife should play. You look well. I said, meaning it. Motherhood agrees with you. She smiled, the gesture softening the aristocratic planes of her face. It has its challenges. But yes, it's been the greatest joy of my life. Julian stood beside his mother, a hand on her elbow. He looked nervous, an expression I rarely saw on him. Where's Clara? Exploring your terrace garden. I gestured through the glass doors where Clara was crouched, examining a potted plant with scientific interest. She's beautiful. Eleanor's voice caught as she watched her granddaughter. Those eyes. Pure Blackwood. And Rivera determination. Julian added quickly, catching my gaze. She's stubborn, curious, brilliant. A perfect combination. Eleanor agreed. We moved to the terrace, where Julian performed introductions with touching formality. Clara, I'd like you to meet your grandmother, Eleanor. She's my mother. Your daddy's mother. Clara studied Eleanor with that assessing gaze that always reminded me of Julian in a board meeting. Then, to my surprise, she walked directly to Eleanor and pointed at her necklace. Pretty. She declared, one of her limited but growing vocabulary words. Eleanor knelt, pearl necklace forgotten, and held out her hands. May I? The question was directed at me, and I appreciated the respect it implied. I nodded, and Eleanor gathered Clara into a gentle embrace. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've waited a long time to meet you." What followed was one of the most surreal lunches of my life. Eleanor Blackwood, society matron and formidable philanthropist, sat on Julian's living room floor and built block towers with Clara. She listened intently as Clara babbled nonsensical stories, responding with appropriate gravity. She ate tiny bites of the peanut butter sandwich Julian had prepared, declaring it delicious, though I suspected it had been decades since anything so pedestrian had passed her lips. Throughout it all, she watched Julian with Clara, her eyes soft with a pride I had never seen during our marriage. When Clara finally succumbed to her afternoon nap, Julian carried her to the nursery he had set up in his spare bedroom, a room that had been transformed in a matter of weeks from a minimalist office to a colorful haven filled with toys, books, and a crib that probably cost more than my first car. "He's a natural," Eleanor observed as we watched from the doorway, Julian settling Clara with practiced ease. "Yes," I agreed. "He is." Eleanor turned to me once Julian had closed the nursery door. "May I speak frankly, Nora? You always have." I smiled slightly, remembering our conversations during my marriage to Julian. "You did a remarkable thing, raising her alone. And an equally remarkable thing, allowing Julian into her life without bitterness or conditions." Eleanor's gaze was direct, honest. "Not many women would be so generous." "It's not about generosity." I repeated what I'd told Julian. "It's about what's right for Clara." Nevertheless, she placed a hand on my arm. "Thank you for giving my son this chance. For giving our family this precious gift." The sincerity in her voice moved me more than I had expected. Eleanor had always been polite, even kind in her way, but never this vulnerable. "What about Robert?" I asked, referring to Julian's father. "Will he want to meet her too?" Eleanor's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Robert will come around. Eventually. Once the DNA results confirm what anyone with eyes can see. And if he doesn't?" I pressed. "Clara doesn't need people in her life who question her place in it. Then he'll miss knowing his only grandchild." Eleanor's voice held a steely certainty I had rarely heard from her. "Family comes first, Nora. Always. Robert knows that, even if he sometimes forgets." Julian joined us then, closing the nursery door softly behind him. "She's asleep," he announced, pride evident in his voice, as if getting a toddler to nap was comparable to closing a billion-dollar deal. Eleanor smiled at her son, then glanced at her watch. "I should go. I have a foundation meeting at 3. She embraced Julian, then turned to me. "Will you walk me out, Nora? I'd like a moment to speak with you privately." Julian raised an eyebrow but didn't object. "I'll check on Clara," he said, disappearing back into the nursery. At the elevator, Eleanor turned to me, her expression serious. "There's something I need to ask you, and I hope you'll be honest with me." "Of course." I braced myself, uncertain what was coming. "Are you and Julian, is there any possibility that you might?" Eleanor faltered, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Reconcile?" The question caught me off guard. "We're focusing on co-parenting," I said carefully. "On being the best parents we can be for Clara." "That's not what I asked." Eleanor's gaze was knowing. "I see the way he looks at you. The way you sometimes look at him when you think no one is watching. We have a complicated history," I admitted. "But whatever happened between us, that's separate from our commitment to Clara." "Is it?" Eleanor pressed. "Because from where I stand, it seems that what broke you apart, your careers, your priorities, hasn't fundamentally changed. And adding a child to that equation only makes it more complex, not less." She was right, of course. The issues that had torn us apart remained. Julian was still heir to the Blackwood Empire, still bound by the expectations and responsibilities that came with that position. I was still dedicated to my research, still unwilling to set aside my career for anyone else's vision of what my life should be. "What are you saying, Eleanor?" I asked directly. "I'm saying that if there's any chance for you two, any chance at all, don't let pride or fear stand in your way." Eleanor's voice softened. "I watched my son after your divorce, Nora. I've never seen him so lost. Not until Clara. Not until you came back into his life." The elevator arrived with a soft chime, saving me from having to respond. Eleanor stepped inside, then held the door. "Just think about it," she said. "That's all I ask." As the doors closed, I stood there contemplating her words. Was there a chance for Julian and me? Did I even want there to be? Or were we simply two people who had once loved each other, now bound forever by the child we had created, a connection that required respect and cooperation but not necessarily a rekindling of what we had lost? These questions followed me back to Julian's apartment, where I found him sitting beside Clara's crib, watching her sleep with an expression of wonder that made my heart contract painfully in my chest. What had Eleanor said? "I see the way he looks at you. The way you sometimes look at him when you think no one is watching." Perhaps some questions didn't need immediate answers. Perhaps, for now, it was enough to watch Julian becoming the father Clara deserved and to recognize that whatever happened between us, we were creating something new and important together, a family that didn't fit any traditional definition but was no less real for its complexity. If you've ever had to navigate a relationship that defies easy labels, that exists in the gray area between what was and what might be, share your experience in the comments below. There's strength in knowing we're not alone in these complex emotional journeys. The DNA test results arrived by courier 3 days later, confirming what anyone with eyes could see: Clara was unquestionably Julian's daughter. With that final obstacle removed, the legal process of adding Julian's name to her birth certificate began, along with the establishment of trusts, inheritance rights, and all the formal recognitions of Clara's position as a Blackwood heir. Robert Blackwood, true to Eleanor's prediction, demanded a meeting once paternity was confirmed beyond doubt. Unlike his wife's warm introduction, this meeting took place in the formal setting of Robert's home office at the Blackwood estate, with Clara dressed in an outfit Eleanor had sent over, a tiny navy blue dress that echoed the Blackwood corporate colors. "She's small for her age," Robert observed after studying his granddaughter with the same critical eye he brought to business acquisitions. "She should be taller by now. Blackwoods are always in the highest percentiles." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that this difficult man was Clara's grandfather and deserved a chance to know her. "She's perfectly within normal growth parameters," Julian replied before I could formulate a polite response. "Her pediatrician says she's developing exceptionally well, particularly her verbal and cognitive skills." Robert harumphed, not quite convinced but unwilling to argue with medical opinion. "She looks like you at that age. Except the skin tone. And the hair." He glanced at me, acknowledging my genetic contribution to his grandchild with grudging acceptance. "She's beautiful," Eleanor interjected smoothly, lifting Clara onto her lap. "And she's a Blackwood, Robert. Your only grandchild." Something softened almost imperceptibly in Robert's stern face as he watched Clara. "She does have the Blackwood eyes," he conceded, as if bestowing a great compliment. "And the chin. Determined." Julian caught my gaze across the room, a silent apology in his eyes. I gave him a small smile in return. We had anticipated this reaction from his father, this clinical assessment, this begrudging acceptance. It was as close to a warm welcome as Robert Blackwood was capable of giving. To my surprise, Clara took matters into her own hands. She climbed down from Eleanor's lap and toddled directly to Robert's imposing desk, pointing at a crystal paperweight that caught the afternoon light. "Blue," she declared, one of her favorite colors to identify. "Yes." Robert agreed, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "It's blue. Mine." Clara asked, reaching for the paperweight with the confidence of a child who had rarely been denied. Robert hesitated, then did something I had never seen in all my years of knowing him. He laughed. A genuine laugh that transformed his austere features. "Not this one," he said, moving the crystal out of reach. "But I think I might have something else you would like." To everyone's astonishment, Robert opened his desk drawer and produced a small snow globe featuring the New York skyline. It had clearly been there for some time, perhaps a forgotten gift or souvenir. "This was your father's when he was little," Robert explained, shaking the globe to send glittering snowflakes swirling around miniature buildings. "He kept it in this very office." Clara's eyes widened with delight as she accepted the unexpected treasure. She shook it vigorously, laughing at the resulting snowstorm. "Careful. It's old," Robert cautioned, though his tone lacked its usual sharpness. I watched this interaction with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. For all his faults, Robert Blackwood was making an effort in his own limited way to connect with his granddaughter. It was more than I had expected, more than Julian had dared hope for. By the time we left the Blackwood estate, Clara had acquired not only the snow globe but a teddy bear from Eleanor's collection and a promise of riding lessons as soon as she was old enough. This from Robert, who apparently considered equestrianism an essential Blackwood skill. She charmed them. Julian said as we drove back to the city, Clara dozing in her car seat clutching her new treasures. "Even my father. I've never seen him give away anything from his desk before. She has that effect on people," I replied, watching the Manhattan skyline emerge in the distance. "It's impossible not to fall in love with her." Julian was quiet for a moment, his hand steady on the steering wheel. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Not telling me sooner. Not giving us the chance to raise her together from the beginning." The question hung between us, heavy with unspoken implications. Did I regret the months of solitude, the sleepless nights, the fear and uncertainty of new motherhood faced alone? Did I regret the decisions that had kept Clara from knowing her father from birth? Sometimes. I answered honestly. But regret isn't productive. We can't change what happened. We can only decide what happens next. Julian nodded, accepting this pragmatic approach. "What do you want to happen next, Nora?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "I'm not sure what you're asking." "For us." His eyes remained on the road, but I could sense the intensity of his focus. "We're co-parents now. We're figuring that out day by day. But is that all we are? All we could be?" Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. "If there's any chance for you two, any chance at all, don't let pride or fear stand in your way. Julian, we broke for reasons that haven't changed," I said carefully. "Your family still expects certain things from you. My career is still demanding. Those fundamental incompatibilities haven't disappeared just because we have a child together. Haven't they?" He glanced at me briefly before returning his attention to the road. "I'm not the same person I was 18 months ago, Nora. Singapore changed me. Coming back, discovering Clara, becoming a father, it's shifted everything." "How?" I challenged, needing to understand what he meant. "I spent my whole life trying to be what my father wanted. To live up to the Blackwood name as he defined it." Julian's voice was reflective, thoughtful. "When you and I were together, I was caught between worlds, wanting to be my own person with you, but still tied to my family's expectations. I couldn't fully commit to either path. And now? Now I know what matters." He said simply. "Clara matters. Being the father she deserves matters. And building a life that reflects my values, not just my inheritance, that matters too." We had reached my apartment building. Julian parked but made no move to get out of the car, turning to face me instead. "I'm not asking for an answer today," he continued. "I'm not even sure what I'm asking for, exactly. Just, possibility. The chance to see if what broke before might be stronger in its mending. His words resonated with something deep inside me, that part that had never fully let go, that still responded to his voice, his presence, the shared history that bound us together even before Clara. "I can't promise anything," I said finally. "But I'm not saying no to possibility." The smile that spread across Julian's face was worth the vulnerability of that admission. For the first time since our reunion, I allowed myself to truly see him not as my ex-husband or Clara's father or the heir to the Blackwood fortune, but simply as Julian. The man I had once loved enough to marry. The man who was proving, day by day, to be more than I had ever given him credit for. "I think possibility is a good place to start," he said softly. In the back seat, Clara stirred, as if sensing the importance of the moment. She blinked sleepily, clutching her snow globe and teddy bear. "Home?" she asked, looking from Julian to me with those Blackwood eyes that saw more than they should. "Yes, sweetheart." I unbuckled my seatbelt. "We're home." Julian helped gather Clara and her new treasures, our hands brushing as we navigated the transition from car to apartment. That simple contact, brief as it was, carried a current of awareness that reminded me of earlier times of first dates and stolen kisses and the heady rush of falling in love. Possibility, indeed. What would you do if you had a second chance with someone who broke your heart? Would you risk everything for the possibility of something better, something stronger than before? Like this video if you believe in second chances, and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories to join a community that understands the complexities of love, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to begin again. The weeks that followed brought a gradual evolution in our unconventional family arrangement. Julian and I established a routine that prioritized Clara's stability while allowing her to develop relationships with both of us, both separately and together. Weekends often found the three of us at the park, at children's museums, or simply spending quiet mornings at my apartment or Julian's. We celebrated Clara's developmental milestones together, her expanding vocabulary, her increasing coordination, her growing curiosity about the world around her. Julian proved to be a devoted father, never missing an opportunity to be present in Clara's life. He rearranged board meetings to attend her pediatrician appointments, conducted international calls while pushing her on swings, and once famously excused himself from a critical negotiation because, as he told his stunned executive team, his daughter had learned to jump with both feet off the ground, and that was non-negotiable. As for the possibility between us, it developed with careful, measured steps. Conversation that extended beyond co-parenting logistics. Dinners after Clara was asleep, where we rediscovered the intellectual connection that had first drawn us together. Moments of shared laughter over Clara's antics that sometimes lingered into something deeper, more meaningful. We were building something new, not a resurrection of our failed marriage, but a relationship grounded in our shared love for Clara and a more mature understanding of each other's strengths and limitations. Christmas approached, bringing with it the question of how to navigate the holiday as our new family unit. The Blackwood traditional Christmas at the family estate was a legendary affair, with formal dinners and carefully orchestrated gift exchanges that would overwhelm a child Clara's age. What if we do something different this year? Julian suggested one evening as we sat in my living room, watching Clara arrange and rearrange her blocks with methodical focus. A compromise between Blackwood tradition and something more, us. What did you have in mind? I asked, intrigued by the thoughtfulness in his expression. The cabin in Vermont, he said, referring to a property his family owned but rarely used. It's small by Blackwood standards, just 4 bedrooms. Rustic, surrounded by forest. We could invite my parents for Christmas dinner, but otherwise keep it just the 3 of us. Simple. Quiet. Snow. Clara announced, looking up from her blocks with sudden interest. She had recently discovered snow through books and was fascinated by the concept. Yes, sweetheart. Julian smiled at her. Lots of snow. We could build a snowman. I considered the proposal. The idea of a quiet Christmas away from city pressures appealed to me, and the compromise of including Julian's parents for the actual holiday seemed reasonable. Okay. I agreed. Vermont for Christmas. Julian's smile was worth any potential complications the arrangement might bring. I'll make the arrangements. Christmas Eve found us settled in the cabin, which Julian had modestly described as small but was in fact a gorgeous timber home with soaring ceilings and panoramic views of snow-covered mountains. Clara was enchanted with the snow, spending hours bundled in a tiny snowsuit, attempting to build snowmen that resembled lumpy pillars more than human figures. The three of us decorated a tree with simple ornaments, strung popcorn garlands that Clara mostly ate, and baked cookies that bore little resemblance to their intended shapes. It was messy, imperfect, and more joyful than any holiday I could remember. That evening, after Clara had finally succumbed to sleep, exhausted from the day's adventures, Julian and I sat before the fireplace with glasses of wine, watching flames dance over logs. "Thank you for this," Julian said, his voice soft in the quiet room. "For giving us this chance at a real family Christmas. It's been good," I acknowledged, allowing myself to relax into the moment. "Clara will remember this, the snow, the cookies, both of us together." Julian's hand found mine on the couch between us, his fingers intertwining with my own in a gesture both familiar and new. "Nora." His voice held a question, a hesitation. "I've been thinking about something. About us." I tensed slightly but didn't pull my hand away. "What about us?" "These past months, watching you with Clara, becoming a father, rebuilding this connection between us, it's made me see things differently." He turned to face me fully, firelight casting shadows across his features. "I know we've been cautious. Taking things slowly. And I respect that. But," I prompted, sensing there was more. "But I'm falling in love with you all over again." He said it simply, directly, in that Julian way that had always cut through pretense. Or maybe I never stopped. I just learned to live with the absence. My heart raced as I tried to formulate a response. Julian let me finish. He squeezed my hand gently. "I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm just telling you where I stand. That possibility we talked about. For me, it's becoming more than possibility. It's becoming what I want most in the world, you, me, Clara. A real family. Not because of obligation or circumstance, but because we choose it. Because we choose each other." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, this was a Julian I had rarely seen during our marriage. A man who had learned to express his feelings without reservation, who had found the courage to risk rejection for the chance at something genuine. "That I'm scared," I admitted, matching his honesty with my own. "Scared that if we try again, we'll fail again. That we'll hurt each other, hurt Clara in the process. I'm scared too." He moved closer, his free hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face. "But I think some things are worth being scared for. Worth taking the risk." The tenderness of his touch, the sincerity in his gaze, they broke through defenses I had carefully maintained since our divorce. Since before our divorce, if I was being completely honest with myself. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as Julian responded with a hunger that matched my own awakening desire. When we finally drew apart, both slightly breathless, Julian rested his forehead against mine. "Is that a yes?" he asked, a smile in his voice. "Maybe," I replied, though my racing heart suggested something more definitive. "A strong maybe. I'll take it." He kissed me again, briefly this time. "For now." We stayed by the fire late into the night, talking as we hadn't talked in years about our fears and hopes, about the mistakes we'd made in our marriage, about the people we'd become in our time apart. About what it might mean to try again, with Clara at the center of our world and a wiser perspective on what truly mattered. No promises were made, no declarations beyond what Julian had already offered. But as I finally went to bed in the early hours of Christmas morning, I felt something I hadn't expected to find in that Vermont cabin, a sense of coming home, not to a place, but to a person. To the possibility of a love that had never quite died, only matured into something potentially stronger than before. Christmas Day brought Eleanor and Robert Blackwood to the cabin, bearing gifts that threatened to overwhelm the space under our modestly decorated tree. To my surprise, Robert made a visible effort to participate in the informal celebrations, even donning a paper crown from a Christmas cracker and reading The Night Before Christmas to Clara with unexpected animation. Eleanor watched Julian and me with knowing eyes, noting the new ease between us, the casual touches, the shared glances. She said nothing directly, but her approving smile when Julian's hand found the small of my back spoke volumes. As the day drew to a close, with Clara asleep surrounded by new toys and Robert and Eleanor preparing to return to the city, Julian pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small wrapped package from his pocket. "It's not what you think, not jewelry or anything like that. Just something I want you to have." I unwrapped it carefully to find a small leather-bound journal. Opening it, I discovered pages of Julian's handwriting dated entries that began shortly after he learned about Clara. "What is this?" I asked, tracing his familiar script with my fingertips. "Every day since I found out about Clara, I've written to her," he explained, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "Things I wish I'd known from the beginning. Milestones I missed. Promises for the future." It was my way of processing everything, of connecting with her even when I wasn't physically present. I turned the pages, catching glimpses of Julian's innermost thoughts. His awe at first seeing Clara. His regret for missed moments. His determination to be the father she deserved. His evolving feelings toward me, respect, gratitude, and eventually, a cautious rekindling of deeper emotions. "This is beautiful." My voice caught as I recognized the gift for what it was, not just a journal, but a testament to Julian's journey into fatherhood, into a new understanding of family and love and what truly mattered. "Someday, when she's older, I want her to have it," he said. "To understand that even though I wasn't there at the beginning, she was in my heart from the moment I knew she existed." I closed the journal, holding it carefully against my chest. "Thank you for showing me this. For trusting me with it." Julian's expression was solemn, his eyes holding mine. "I trust you with everything, Nora. I always have. Even when I didn't show it properly." In that moment, surrounded by the evidence of the holiday we had created together, I allowed myself to truly believe in the possibility of us not as the couple we had been, bound by passion but divided by priorities, but as something new. Something tempered by separation, strengthened by Clara's love, forged in the fire of difficult choices and second chances. It wouldn't be easy. We still had different worlds, different demands on our time and energy. But we also had something we hadn't had before: perspective. Understanding of what we could lose by holding too tightly to pride or expectation. Appreciation for the rare gift of finding each other again after thinking that chapter was closed forever. As Julian's parents departed and the cabin settled into evening quiet, with Clara sleeping peacefully and snow falling gently outside the windows, I made my own silent promise. Not to forget the lessons of our past, not to ignore the challenges that remained, but to approach this new beginning with an open heart. To give Julian, to give us the chance to discover what we might become together. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about first meetings or whirlwind romances. They're about second chances. About the courage to try again after heartbreak. About finding your way back to someone when the timing is finally right. Clara would grow up knowing she was loved by both her parents together or apart. But as Julian's arm wrapped around my waist as we watched the snow from the cabin's picture window, I allowed myself to hope that she might also witness something equally precious. The redemption of a love that had been lost and found, stronger in its mending than it had ever been before. Have you ever received a second chance that changed the course of your life? A moment where forgiveness opened doors you thought were permanently closed? Share your story in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories for more tales that remind us it's never too late to rewrite our endings. Spring came to New York, bringing with it Clara's second birthday and new developments in our cautiously evolving family. Julian and I had continued our careful dance of rediscovery, spending time together both with and without Clara, learning to trust again, to communicate better than we had during our marriage. We hadn't rushed into defining our relationship, letting it unfold naturally as we navigated the more immediate concerns of co-parenting and Clara's growing awareness of her world. She now recognized Julian confidently as Daddy, running to him with outstretched arms whenever he appeared, demanding story time, piggyback rides, and his undivided attention with the absolute certainty that it would be given. For Clara's birthday, we planned a small celebration at Julian's apartment, which had undergone a remarkable transformation over the past months. Once a sleek, minimalist space designed more for impression than comfort, it now featured toy bins in the living room, child-safe furniture, and colorful artwork hanging at Clara's eye level. It was the home of a father, not just a Blackwood heir. The guest list was deliberately limited: Julian's parents, Dr. Layton and his wife, my father who had flown in from Arizona, and a few close friends who had supported me through pregnancy and early motherhood. No elaborate Blackwood production, despite Eleanor's initial suggestions involving professional photographers and custom dessert sculptures. As I arranged flowers in Julian's kitchen, watching through the window as he helped Clara feed ducks in the building's private garden, my father joined me with a cup of coffee in hand. "He's good with her," Dad observed, following my gaze. "Better than I expected, given the circumstances." "Yes," I agreed. "He is, and with you?" my father asked gently. "How's that going?" I turned to face him, appreciating his direct approach. Dad had always been my rock, the high school physics teacher who had raised me after my mother's death, who had supported every decision I'd made even when he disagreed, who had flown to New York the moment I told him I was pregnant and stayed for 2 weeks after Clara's birth, learning to change diapers at 65. "It's evolving." I chose my words carefully. "We're taking things slowly. Learning from our mistakes." "Good." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "You know, when you told me about the divorce, I wasn't surprised. Not because I didn't think you loved each other, but because you were both too stubborn to bend when you needed to." "Dad," I protested mildly. "It's true." He set down his mug. "You were so determined to prove you didn't need his name or his money that you sometimes pushed him away when he was just trying to share his life with you. And he was so caught up in family legacy that he couldn't see you needed to build your own." I stared at my father, surprised by this assessment. "You never said any of this before." "Not my place." He shrugged. "But now, watching you two circling each other again, I figure maybe it's time for some fatherly wisdom. Love isn't about finding someone perfect, Nora. It's about finding someone whose flaws you can live with, and who can live with yours." Through the window, I watched as Julian crouched beside Clara, pointing out something in the water that made her laugh with delight. His expression as he looked at our daughter was one of pure joy, uncomplicated by the pressures and expectations that had shadowed him during our marriage. "You think we deserve a second chance?" I asked quietly. "I think second chances are rare gifts," Dad replied. "And only a fool turns down a gift without at least seeing what's inside." The wisdom of his words stayed with me throughout the birthday celebration, as I watched Julian navigate seamlessly between attentive father and gracious host. He had changed in subtle but significant ways, more present in each moment, less concerned with appearances, more willing to laugh at himself when Clara's birthday cake ended up partially on his expensive shirt. Even Robert Blackwood seemed mellowed, sitting on the floor with Clara as she showed him her new blocks, listening with apparent interest to her still developing explanations of colors and shapes. When she called him Grandpa for the first time, I caught a brief flash of emotion crossing his usually impassive face. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Julian's father approached me while Julian was saying goodbye to Dr. Layton. "You've done well with her," Robert said abruptly, nodding toward Clara who was examining her new gifts with serious concentration. "She's bright. Focused. Good Blackwood traits." Coming from Robert, this was high praise indeed. "Thank you," I replied. "She's an amazing child. Julian is different since she came into his life." Since you came back into it. He added, studying me with those penetrating eyes so like his son's. More centered. More certain of his priorities. I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected personal observation from a man who had always kept me at a professional distance. Robert cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with emotional topics but determined to continue. I wasn't supportive of your marriage. I thought Julian needed someone who understood our world, who would stand beside him in the way Eleanor has stood beside me. That's no secret, Mr. Blackwood. I kept my tone neutral, refusing to be intimidated by his directness. I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost him considerable effort. My son needed someone who would challenge him. Make him define himself beyond the Blackwood name. You did that. You do that. Before I could recover from the shock of hearing Robert Blackwood admit he was wrong about anything, he continued. Whatever happens between you two now, and Eleanor seems convinced something is happening, you have my support. For what that's worth. He extended his hand formally, the gesture both archaic and somehow touching in its sincerity. It's worth a great deal. I said, accepting the handshake. Thank you. After all the guests had departed and Clara had finally succumbed to the exhaustion of excitement, cake, and presents, Julian and I collapsed onto his sofa, the apartment quiet except for the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers, that went well. Julian observed, loosening his tie. Even my father behaved himself. Better than behaved. I told him about Robert's unexpected olive branch, watching Julian's expression shift from surprise to cautious pleasure. That's unprecedented. He said finally. My father doesn't admit mistakes. Ever. Well, apparently Clara has magical powers. I smiled, leaning back against the cushions. She's managed to soften the great Robert Blackwood. Julian laughed, the sound relaxed and genuine. She takes after her mother that way. You always did have a talent for making people see things differently. He reached for my hand, a gesture that had become increasingly natural between us. I intertwined my fingers with his, enjoying the simple connection. I've been thinking. Julian said after a comfortable silence. About us. About what comes next. My heart quickened, but I kept my voice steady. What about us? We've been taking things slowly. Testing the waters. Seeing if what we had could be rebuilt into something stronger. He turned to face me fully. I think it's time to stop testing and start building. What are you saying? Move in with me. Julian's eyes held mine, serious and certain. You and Clara. Let's make a real home together, not your apartment or mine, but somewhere new. A fresh start. The proposal caught me off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. We had been moving in this direction for months, each step bringing us closer to a reunion neither of us had anticipated when Julian first discovered Clara's existence. That's a big step. I said cautiously. It is. He acknowledged. But I think we're ready. Clara's already confused by having two homes, two sets of toys, two of everything. And I want to wake up with both of you every morning, not just on my designated days. And what about everything else? My work, your family obligations, all the things that pulled us apart before. Julian didn't hesitate. Your work is important to you, to science, to families who need the breakthroughs you're creating. I would never ask you to scale back or compromise that passion. As for my family obligations. He smiled slightly. I think you've noticed I've developed a more selective approach to those. It was true. Julian had begun delegating more, prioritizing family time over unnecessary business functions, standing up to his father when Robert's expectations conflicted with his role as Clara's father. We're different people now, Nora. Julian continued. We've both learned what matters, what's worth fighting for. I think we can build something better than what we had before, something based on mutual respect, on understanding each other's needs rather than expecting the other to change. His words resonated with what my father had said earlier about finding someone whose flaws you could live with, and who could live with yours. About second chances being gifts too rare to refuse without consideration that I need to think about it. I said honestly. Not because I don't want this, but because I want to be sure. For Clara's sake. For all of us. Julian nodded, accepting this answer without disappointment or pressure. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. He leaned forward and kissed me, a kiss that held promise and patience in equal measure. When we separated, I saw in his eyes the same Julian who had once captured my heart in a hospital emergency room, but tempered now by experience, by loss, by the profound love he had discovered in fatherhood. Later that night, as I prepared to take a sleeping Clara back to our apartment, Julian helped gather her numerous birthday gifts, packing them carefully into bags. You know, he said casually, pausing with a stuffed giraffe in hand. Whatever you decide about moving in together, I've been thinking we should look at schools for Clara. The best preschools have waiting lists that extend years in advance. I laughed softly, mindful of Clara asleep in Julian's spare bedroom. She's just turned 2 today. Isn't it a bit early for academic planning? Not for the Blackwood air. Julian's tone was light, but I could hear the genuine consideration beneath it. But actually, I was thinking of that progressive school in Brooklyn, the one with the science-focused curriculum and diversity scholarship program. It seems like the kind of place that would nurture her mind without forcing her into any predetermined Blackwood mold. The fact that he had researched such options, that he was thinking about Clara's education in terms of her individual needs rather than family tradition, spoke volumes about how Julian had grown as a father, as a person. That sounds perfect. I said, meaning it. We can visit after her birthday excitement settles down. As Julian walked us to the door, Clara nestled against his shoulder in sleep before he would transfer her to my arms for the journey home. I found myself already knowing what my answer would be about moving in together. About taking this next step toward rebuilding what we had lost and creating something new in its place. Some things were worth the risk. Some chances too important to let fear stand in the way. 2 weeks later, we began looking for a new home, not a Blackwood penthouse or a practical researcher's apartment, but something that would be uniquely ours. A place where Clara could grow surrounded by both parents' love, where Julian and I could continue our journey of rediscovery, of second chances seized rather than opportunities missed. Life rarely offers perfect timing or ideal circumstances for its most important decisions. Sometimes the greatest risks lead to the most profound rewards. Sometimes what breaks under pressure can be mended into something stronger, more beautiful for having been broken. And sometimes, in the most unexpected ways, through mistakes and misunderstandings and moments of clarity, we find our way back to where we truly belong, not to who we were, but to who we can become together. If you believe that true love deserves a second chance, that families come in all forms, and that it's never too late to rewrite your own story, please like and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that closed doors can sometimes reopen when we least expect it, and that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from what we thought were endings. Because in the end, it's not about perfect timing or fairy tale romances. It's about the courage to try again, the wisdom to learn from past mistakes, and the love that makes it all worthwhile, especially when that love comes with a pair of Blackwood blue eyes and a tiny face that reminds you every day of what really matters.